Hey everybody, I am back with another movie review, and today I'll be covering the sequel to last week's review, The Fantastic Four, the Tim Story film of 2005. Now I'm covering Rise of the Silver Surfer. Before I continue, please do me a huge favor and leave a like and comment below. Let me know what you guys think of this film. Have you recently revisited? How long has it been? And what are your opinions about it years later, especially after, like, spoiler of Deadpool and Wolverine, that they brought back Chris Evans as Johnny Storm in that film. Uh, yeah, man. All right. Before I continue, this movie was directed by Tim Story again, and I suspect that probably would have been like a third film if it wasn't for, like, you know, it wasn't the best. But revisiting after so many years, as I stated before in the previous movie last week, that I don't think people were ready for it, as because if you plot both of these movies from the mid 2000s to today, or even the latter 2000s, then it probably been more well received, because it's true to the comics, for the most part. Colorful costumes, the chemistry with the cast is just, like, good. They all, like, it's just like you can tell they have fun on set, and they had a camaraderie, which we want from the Fantastic Four, because they're Marvel's first family. You want them to interact like a family would, which they do a very good job with these actors. And I didn't get a chance to say this in my last review of the first film, that I appreciate Michael Chiklis' look for the Thing, because it's so practical. You don't need it like the CGI mess like you saw from, like, the Fantastic film. It's done its job pretty much, and rather than like a CGI mess, you got something the actors can look at and physically touch, and you buy that better. You don't you don't necessarily need the Thing to be like this bombastic hulking figure. You don't really need that, in my opinion. So I really love Michael Chiklis' look of Benjamin Grimm here. Just my take. All right. This came out in 2007. Like, God, like a literal year before the first Iron Man film. That is long.
Phrasing?
So it had like a budget between 120 to 130 million dollars, but it raked in at the box office. Get this, I didn't even know this. $301 million. And maybe it's because as a scene's shot in China, so they gotta get that China money. But I thought, like, it, because people's reviews of it isn't good, and I admit there were some, issues with this film. It's probably not as high as it was when it first came out. I think after so many years of with the MCU and other DC properties, and we had like a slew of good films and a slew of bad films, some worse than others, that makes this movie. And honestly, I think this movie, despite its faults, it is like, it knows what the job is, if you catch my drift. And people, went on board and enjoy, what they were doing. But it's it's one of those cases where it's like, so bad it's good kind of thing, in my opinion. I think this is one of those, because I was kind of like dreading, because like I got that warp procession. Like, man, last time I remember, it was not a good time watching this because, like, man, there was some faults in this. But revisiting, it's like, you know, like, see, it still has issues, but I having a good time. And at the very bare minimum, you should feel that way with the film. Because if you don't even have that, then you do a horrible job in making this project. Because after like the Acolyte, because that was like Acolyte and Secret Invasion, they were so bottom of the barrel terrible that compared to this movie is like Godfather by comparison. Because like you got like these charming characters you want to follow. You got them in bright, colorful costumes, and they're charismatic, and just you're just in for a fun ride. Okay. So we got returning characters: Ian Gifford as Reed Richards, Jessica Alba as Sue Storm, Chris Evans Johnny Storm, Michael Chiklis Ben Grimm, Julian McCann as Victor Von Doom, and of course Kerry Washington as Alicia Masters. And then we got the late great Andre Bauer as General Hager. I gotta check some here. I knew it. I didn't get this. I don't think anybody even point this out. And I might be, don't quote me on this, but I might be the first one to point this out. There is a subordinate working under General Hager named Captain Rye, Frankie Rye, who in the comics is a herald of Galactus named Nova, who became, his herald after the Silver Surfer. I think it was after the Silver Surfer. And it's like, wow. Because after all these years, because Johnny literally called her by her first name, Frankie. And he had like a thing with her, just like in the comics. It's like, wow. Kudos to Tim Story. I don't think anybody really pointed that out. It's kind of wild to me that, like, because I appreciate when people work on these projects about certain, like, comic book figures or video game figures, that they do their research or are definitely fans of themselves at least, and like bring in like little characters that diehard fans would easily point out. I really wish that maybe he would have highlighted her a little bit better, but I guess because maybe it was too subtle for most people. And how many people remember Nova like that? The Herald, not the police the space cop, not space cop Nova, the Herald Nova. It's crazy how we got like 3 different types of Novas in Marvel Comics. And we got Doug Jones, who physically is on film as the Silver Surfer, and Lawrence Fishburne, who voices the Silver Surfer. And I seen Doug Jones and stuff, and he's really good. And of course, Lawrence Fishburne is always good. But I'm starting to think, like, why couldn't we just have Doug Jones do the voice? He has a decent voice. And of course, we all love how Lawrence Fishburne's vocal cadence, it brings some level of gravitas, which I'm not too bent on the shape of it. But some people pointed out, it's like, it's like you could just have Doug Jones do the voice. Doesn't really need to involve Lawrence Fishburne in it. But I started pointing out, doesn't really bother me. But only thing I want to bring up, because I want to talk about this now, because it was like a huge controversy when they started announcing stuff for the MCU's version of the Fantastic Four with First Steps, and then bringing in a female Silver Surfer. And it's like, why out the gate? I talk about this in like a separate video, which you can check out on my YouTube channel, as to how unnecessary it seems. It's like you're trying to get like some kind of brownie points from certain activists and people sliver of the community of people on the left, and it's or hyper left, I should say, where it's like when you're introducing characters for the first time in a Marvel property like the MCU, just bring in people that they recognize first and foremost. It's not like, people would be, because they've been like, why can't we have a female Silver Surfer? Well, because that is a very niche thing. Because what they bring it in is Norrin Radd, aka the Silver Surfer's wife, as the Silver Surfer. And they want to point out that one little comic that's like an Elseworlds thing where she was the Silver Surfer instead of her husband. And it's like, not many people know this. Generally, people know the Silver Surfer to be a dude. And so, why you want to, light a fire that doesn't need to be by just giving what the people expecting and what they want. We want the Fantastic Four. And you bring in the Silver Surfer, bring in like Norrin Radd, a guy that we all know. And then later stuff, you can start bringing in his wife as a Silver Surfer. And people be a little bit okay with that because like you already established a male, like the more familiar version. Instead of just this like unnecessary flip flop. So like I said, kudos to Tim Story. I don't think, just like Sam Raimi and Joel Schumacher, I think Tim Story has gotten a raw deal over the years with, because of these Fantastic Four films. And looking back, there were issues, but you cannot say you didn't have like a good time watching them and seeing these, colorful costumes and these fun interactions with these four. Anyway, and I gotta say, this version of Doctor Doom is my Doctor Doom. I gotta say, like, I'm pretty sure RDJ was gonna do like a great job in his interpretation, but this guy, McCann, he was having fun. You can just tell he was having fun playing the villain and just, just being smarmy. And like Doctor Doom has a level of arrogance and superiority which this guy exudes. The only issue I personally probably have is just like this dude doesn't have any type of magic mixed in with his science. Really wish we kind of incorporate that a little bit. Anyway, so the movie begins where the Silver Surfer is passing by these planets, and then sometime later it gets destroyed, and then he's making his way to Earth. And as he's flying by Latveria, where Dr. Doom's statue corpse was delivered, his power that he was emanating revives him and and wakes him up. Then we get this whole media circus where, like the comics, the Fantastic Four are kind of like the celebrities. It's like, if you look at them today's standards, they would probably be considered like the Kardashians or the Osbournes. Only they're into science and not like, rock and roll, or, before they got into cosmetics, any stupid sex tapes or anything like that. Or just famous for being famous. They actually are something. And now, like in the comics, because one of the most iconic comic books is the marriage between Reed Richards and Susan Storm, which at some point I want to do like a review of that particular comic, because it was one of the most major deals in comic book history, right along with something like Superman and Lois Lane's marriage, or Spider-Man and Mary Jane. Is like a huge deal. these iconic couples finally getting married. And this is one of the glaring problems. And this, I hate to say this, but Jessica Alba, if there was like a weak link that I gotta point out, she would be slightly like the weakest link if I had to point out any, because some to some degree, these films forget that she is like a scientist in her own right, and she's blowing things. I mean, I get it, because it's kind of like, I won't say it's forced drama, but it's kind of sort of forced drama where she's like, I want to have a normal life. How can I raise a family in this kind of a situation? And they keep pushing back their wedding nuptials because they keep having to save the world from other, situations. And she's getting distraught over it. Granted, that is an issue. However, it's like you're superheroes. Okay? Maybe a glorious tip-top kind of wedding isn't something that you can allow yourself the luxury of. I'm not saying you need to elope or anything like that, but just do something, small and quick, which they do at the end of this. And she's concerned like over Zit, that she had to use her invisibility powers to cover up and concentrate on that, even though it doesn't show back up at any point, especially when things go down. So it's kind of like left just pointless. I don't know. It's maybe something supposed to be funny about that. But there's been like, disturbances around the world where, Egypt is getting blizzards and oceans are freezing over. So there's weird anomalies happening. So while Johnny, who like Christoph has done an amazing job as Captain America, but his Johnny Storm, I'm so glad they brought him back for that role because he has fun with that particular character. He's not taken so serious. I'm kind of shocked that in Deadpool and Wolverine he has such a freaking potty mouth. But I get it. This movie is PG-13. Can't really let gratuitous language fly like that. But he plans to throw his future brother-in-law Reed a bachelor party, even though Reed is hesitant on it. He's just want to work on a device to try to detect the next anomaly, so they can see what they can do about it. Johnny brings Reed and Ben out to the club to just celebrate Reed before he gets married. And of course he brings in some lovely ladies, and I love Ian Gifford's portrayal as Reed Richards. He is like the pitch perfect Reed Richards in my opinion. He looks like spot on, and of course he carries that very well. I mean, John Krasinski, from the little we have with him, he was a pretty spot on Reed Richards in my opinion too. Don't know about Pedro Pascal. Knowing he's a great actor, I'm pretty sure he'll do some level of a great job. But like Ian and John Krasinski done an impressive job as Reed Richards. And here with Ian, he just, instead of like doing crazy jello shots or anything wild, he's like impressing these girls about how like the Big Bang happened, and it's like I like them just utilizing their powers just like on everyday mundane stuff. Like he's just doing like a illustration with his hands and let it stretch out to like expand, and everybody just like, oh my god. It's just like, yeah, it's just like they are impressed with the fact that like, oh wow, you're so smart, like thank you, Candy. It's like, of course her name's freaking Candy. It was like so freaking funny. And then they bring him on the dance floor, and like I said, and like Ben and Johnny looking on as, you know, watching Reed kind of loosen up because he's always been kind of reserved, but he's finally can just spend at least a moment unwinding. And just like Avengers Age of Ultron, we see like the Avengers just chilling out. And that's probably one of the best parts in a lot of people's opinions, when just seeing just the Avengers hanging out as just friends and not having to do anything crazy. Here, it's kind of the same thing in my opinion. Looking back on it, it's like, yeah, it was just the Fantastic Four just hanging out and watching Reed just loosen up, and he just seeing like, you know, stretching out his powers, dancing with these two ladies, and him just impressing everybody, and it's just fun until like the general shows up. Very, of course, Andre Bauer does an impressive job. He's just being like that stone faced, kind of like what we saw from Brooklyn Nine-Nine, just that whole stoic, stone faced, stereotypical general. And he is, you know, very disrespectful towards like Reed and the Fantastic Four, but he goes to Susan to find Reed Richards, and it's like, is there anything I can help you with? Yes, you can help me find Reed Richards. And it's like, like I said, like my biggest, I won't say the biggest, but it's definitely an issue where you tend to forget like she is like a credible scientist, and the fact that, you know, Tim Story did kind of reduce her to just like doting wife, and Susan Storm is much more than that. But I do like how she is like consoling Reed when things, you know, he's stressed, and she, you know, doesn't put up with his crap at the same time, but she's like, sit and relax. And she just like hold him. And, you know, it's like, yeah, it's like what like a wife would, you expect a wife to for a husband or boyfriend or fiance in this case at the moment. But it's just like, yeah, but at the same time, you do not want to lose that aspect of the character where she is like a legit scientist. Matter of fact, she's, you know, also an archaeologist. You know, she has degrees necessary to be considered like a doctor in archaeology in the comics. Of course, we didn't know that at the time, but, you know, it's confirmed not too long ago in Marvel Comics right now. She also has a degree for archaeology, which is pretty dope. So when they arrive at the club, and the general wants Reed to build a machine to detect this thing, but Reed stands on business and is like, sorry, I can recommend some people to help build the machine that you need, but I'm getting married tomorrow, so you're gonna have to find somebody else. And, you know, I like that because it's like, it shows some growth with Reed, where he's like from like the previous film where he would have been kind of nebbish about it, but it's like, no, he, you know, has a bit of backbone, and it's like, you know, look, like I'm about to get married. I don't have time to do all this, even though he kind of go backtracks a bit in the next scene where he's, you know, building a machine in secret, you know, because it's still that part of him as a scientist and an explorer, like the comics, he wants to know what's this anomaly, you know, the source of this anomaly as much as anybody else. Of course, Dr. Doom is tracking this thing himself in Latveria, which I kind of wish we get a little bit more of Doomstat, his castle. And you know, the Ceres, because in Latveria they hailed Dr. Doom as their pretty much Lord and Savior on Earth, and they idolize him. And of course, in the comics, they look at the Fantastic Four, or especially Reed Richards, as like boogeymen, which is kind of funny. And we kind of wish we would have gotten like some Doombots. We never got that, which is like a shame. But as the wedding's being prepared. Oh, of course, like I said, I love the dynamic between these actors. Of course, when Johnny always teasing Ben, it's just hilarious because he's like the childlike aspects that's charming and not like overdoing it to the point of annoyance. Like Chris Evans knows how to play that right and balance that, where we don't find Johnny so annoying, where he has his moments, but by and large, Johnny is has immature aspects. He's not immature; he has immature aspects that makes it more charming and not annoying. And it's like how do you guys? It's like that's none of your business. Just worry about Alicia. It'd be a shame to find out she was killed in a rock slide. And then you see later when she has a scene. He has a scene with Alicia, who is like the supporting character of the Fantastic Four's roster, where she is always lending an ear, is like like as much as Sue is, she's also like kind of like the soul of the Fantastic Four, like an outside perspective, where she consoles Susan, whereas like to remind Susan like, hey, not everybody's gonna have like a normal life. I mean, look at me and Ben. We're not exactly normal, but we make it work, and you and Reed will do the same. And then she has a moment with, because I like it, because you cast somebody like Kerry Watson, you don't like put her in the background. She has moments where it's like, yeah, she has that outsider perspective that's kind of heartwarming a bit. Which, by the way, it's kind of weird that in the comics we never had like a moment between Alicia Masters with Daredevil, because the two most known blind people in Marvel Comics never had any kind of interactions with each other. It's kind of weird if you think about it. But she has a moment with Johnny where it's like, it's not nice to tease him like that. And Johnny's like, come on, I was just kidding. And she points out to Johnny where it's like, I don't know, I think it kind of bother you to see him so happy. And pretty much telling him like, sometimes you probably gotta, just, take things a little bit seriously. Because not everybody's gonna find it funny when you do things like that. Pretty much, it's like you just, mature a little bit. It's all fun and games, but every once in a while you need to kind of like eventually kind of grow up a little bit. You don't miss that don't lose that youthful spirit, but there's a time and a place. But we get a moment like that where he looks at the wedding dress of Susan and he tells her, like, with all sincerity, it's like, Dad will be proud. And it's like, it's a nice little moment where it's like, yeah, Chris Evans knows how to balance that. And by extension, Tim Story and the writers, they know how to balance out, like, maybe to some degree, but it's like, I'm trying to pull in the stuff that I noticed that is actually like a decent thing from this film. Doesn't negate the fact that it has issues. We all are familiar with the issues. But it's like, you look at it now, you can see the subtleness of it, that I was kind of young at the time, so I didn't really peep this. But I'm looking at it now, and it's like, yeah, there's like a nice little balance Chris Evans walked there, where it's like, yeah, it's like, he's not cracking jokes all the time. He sees Susan and he's like, his sister's about to get married and he's like so happy for her. He takes a moment to actually like, Dad would be proud of you right now, because it's like he's so proud of her. And he just gives her a hug, and that's just like a nice heartwarming moment without any jokes. But then the anomaly shows up again and the Silver Surfer shows up in New York and ends up destroying the machine that rebuilt to detect him because he picks up that he was being detected, showing the level of power of the Silver Surfer because he's one of the most powerful characters in Marvel Comics. And it is greatly, I won't say greatly, but it was pretty decently displayed in this movie. So as you find by, things go haywire, and we get a fun moment where Stanley tried to break, breaking in the wedding of Susan and Reed Richards. I'm pretty sure, kind of reminiscent to the comics where he's trying to break into the wedding so he can see it for himself. So it's kind of like, bringing that up. It was kind of fun. So Ben ends up saving Sue from this nearly crashing helicopter. Don't know why I need a helicopter here. I guess because news outlets and everybody else trying to film this epic wedding is because it's a huge. It was like a media circus, pretty much. Johnny flies off to follow the Silver Surfer, and of course, displaying his powers because the power of Cosmic pretty much does a wide variety of things. You can easily look it up on Marvel Wiki to get the complete lowdown, but it's insane how powerful the Silver Surfer is. It is only like a handful of other Marvel characters that's probably more powerful than him, like Thanos or Galactus. That level of power it gotta be pretty high in order to tangle with the Silver Surfer. He even fought like the Hulk, which is not an easy feat. He's only like nearly wins every once in a while. So there's like a high-speed chase through the air with Johnny trying to catch up to the Silver Surfer, and you see like an awesome display of power where he's just passing through solid objects, merging with his sword to look down underneath to see who's following him. It's kind of cool. It's a cool moment with the Silver Surfer that we kind of ignore or overlook because it was like the other issues this movie has that kind of, I guess, outweigh the cool moments that we get. But the cool display of the Silver Surfer's powers are awesome. Like later on we see like missiles flying at him and he kind of like uses board to just absorb it and just like go about his business. It's like that's insanely powerful and a cool display. But as Johnny is nearly catching up with him, the Silver Surfer stops, catch him by the throat, and just starts choking him. And I remember as a kid watching the trailer of this, just seeing the Silver Surfer just, pulling Johnny in the Earth's atmosphere and just tossing him to the, down. And it's like, rewatching that trailer, that's like, oh my God, this dude's insane. And so he managed, Johnny managed to survive when he, flames on his powers. But, Sue notices Johnny's like not feeling well, and she tries to see if like, oh, are you okay? As soon as she touches him, they swap abilities, and of course we get a gratuitous, sexy shot with Jessica Alba because she's good looking, and she ends up burning off her clothes, not controlling her flight. And Reed notices and he tells them to, touch again. So they switch powers, and of course we get a gratuitous like half naked scene with Jessica Alba. By the way, I need to point this out. I didn't notice years ago. Maybe I did, but kind of forgot about it. But I do not care for Jessica Alba's hair. Maybe she was wearing some type of wig, maybe compared to the first film, maybe because she have to dye her hair blonde for the role, but here she might have to, she wanted to probably wear a wig instead maybe. But I also noticed that her and Ben's eyes are very blue, Now, it makes sense with Ben because he's known as the ever loving blue eyed thing, which is a nice touch. But Sue's eyes, I don't recall being, it might have been blue before. Because if you look back on the first film and take a still shot of Sue from there, and compare it to a still shot of Sue in this film, she is definitely having bluer eyes, like very blue, compared to the first film when that wasn't a thing. Don't know why we needed that for her. And as something I know is kind of like, wow, she has got very blue eyes. Didn't even remember she having before. Don't know why they had to go with that for her. But rerun some experiments on Johnny, and he sees that when he made contact with the Silver Surfer, because he holds the power cosmic, which is, very potent, because he's just drenched in it. Because Galactus, if you know the story, origin story of the Silver Surfer, he got his powers from Galactus, who is just running on cosmic power, and he bestowed a sliver of that to a sliver, but still very mighty, to Norrin Radd to turn him into the Silver Surfer. And because he's just such a pure essence, coming in contact with somebody who's imbued by cosmic rays caused it to go in flux. And so now that whenever Johnny physically touches any of the other members of the FF, he ends up switching powers with them. And of course, Ben is getting a kick out of this because we always get like at least one where we see Ben as his normal self. And he ends up touching Johnny, and we get like a decent moment where we see Chris Evans as like a thing type person and his look of it. And I love when the switch happens, you see this like aura around each one because it comes with a different color. Reed is a lot heavier shade of blue. Johnny is red. Ben is orange. Sue is more like a whitest hue, which is kind of like a good indicator of a different set of powers. I noticed that, and it's kind of like a cool trick that you put a little extra effort in. Eagle eye viewers will take notice. And of course, Ben's having a kick out of this because, like, like he's throwing fireballs at Johnny's head. Like, I can see why you love that now. He's getting a kick out of this. It's like, yeah, payback time's a bitch, isn't it? Of course, Johnny, immediately switches back, and of course Ben's like, "Oh, we're gonna spend a whole lot of time together, Flame Brain." Which Johnny could have just done him a solid there, whereas like switch powers with Ben for like an hour so he can do with Alicia Masters for at least a couple of rounds, knock her up, and then switch back. So you can have that moment, because I don't know how, even though as stated in a previous movie in my review, that his organs still function the same even despite it being solid. Don't know how he can physically sexually interact with Alicia Masters. So it's like Johnny could easily do his friend a solid on this one, at least for an hour, so he can get one off, at least a couple ones off, get out of his system. And then, because I can't imagine him being able to do that. Maybe his penis still functions the same way, sorta. I'm not sure. I don't want to know too much of the intricacies of Ben Grimm's body. They kind of cover that in Mallrats a bit. I don't know. But then we see that Silver Surfer is flying over this snowy landscape, and Doom hails him down and tries to team up with him. And of course, Silver Surfer says, like, all you know is at the end. And of course, Victor, being Victor, tries to make him stop so he can explain himself. He shocks him. Then, of course, Silver Surfer didn't like that. Then he sends out a pulse wave at Doom, knocking him down. But in doing so, ends up healing all of his scars. So after having like a private chat between Ree and Sue, having a private chat, Johnny overhears them, thinking about after when they officially get married, they want to just quit the FF and just have like a normal life, which Johnny is bothered because he likes them working as a team. He likes what they got going on. He doesn't want that to change. Of course, he's not able to express that, so he kind of passive aggressively kind of acts around them. When Reed then picks up another sequence of events where every time Silver Surfer arrives, there's some kind of crater appears, and the next one's going to be in London, like near some kind of river in London. They get there, and of course these four end up bickering, and they trying to save the people from this falling Ferris wheel, which they do despite Johnny's bumping into Sue, and it causes they can't function because they're so used to with their own powers. Now they don't know how to utilize each other's powers when Johnny touches one of them, nearly causing a danger to the innocents and themselves. And to this day, I never did care for the way Reed kind of snaps at Johnny like that and saying you're nearly in danger of us all. He tells him to stay away from his own sister. It's kind of bogus. I mean, over time, I understood where it's this is love of his life, and she nearly died, so he, was very emotional, which is, Reed's always, had emotion, but he just he looks at everything with super, with logic based. But it's kind of a moment where it's he nearly lost someone he cares about, so he kind of let that fly without realizing what he was saying to her own brother. So I never care for the way Reed kind of snaps like that, but I understood, but I still don't care for it. Then end up making their way back home, and the general introduces Victor to these guys again, and the other was what the hell, man? It was do you know this guy, who this guy is and what he was, what he tried to do? And General's not trying to hear it. It's his way or the highway. We're going to work with Victor in order to stop this guy. Because Reed, picks up on the fact that every planet the Silver Surfer goes to, 8 days later, it ends up being destroyed. So they think, this Surfer is the one that ends up causing the destruction of their planet. So they're forced to work with Victor in order to come up with a device to separate the Surfer from his board, when somehow Victor has some kind of video recording of his interaction with the Surfer, and they notice how a pulse was emanating from the board into his body. So they need to separate him from the board. So Ben and Johnny go to a bar to have a one-on-one chat, and Johnny is still butthurt about the FF might be breaking up, but also the fact that there's a possible world-ending scenario going on, and like what we're gonna do if our final hours. And Ben is like, well, before I would have preferred to go down fighting, but on Odyssey, I just want to spend my final moments holding Alicia. Which is like a cool, and that's another thing. Like Ben and Alicia's relationship is, not highlighted enough because they're an awesome couple. In the current comics, I do not care for the fact that they had to adopt these two alien kids, one Kree and one Skrull. And it's kind of lame in my opinion. I never liked that. And it's like, now that we established in the current comics that Ben once a year reverts back to his normal state, he could have his little honeymoon moment with Alicia, impregnate her, and have some legit kids. Biology, natural. I can't even say the biology word. And it's just like a lame way to add on more kids to the roster for the Fantastic Four family, and it's like, God, I don't care for those kids. Anyway, so Victor in secret builds a device that he want to use to steal the board away. They realize that the next location the Zephyr will be at will be the Black Forest, so that's where they'll set up a trap. And Reed's trying to tell the general he needs like a particular perimeter, and of course the general's like not want to listen to him. He's just like, stay where I tell you, blah blah blah. And he's trying to use like a football metaphor. And it's like I'm the quarterback. You do as I say. And then I love this moment with Reed. Like this is like a cool moment that even to some degree that Victor was slightly impressed, because you see like a little smirk moment from him. He's looking on from behind, and it's like with like Superman and Lex and Spider-Man and Norman Osborn, Batman and Joker. There's like they're two sides of the same coin, and to some degree they have some respect for one another. They might admit it in secret, but Victor has some small respect for Reed, even though he probably would never admit it. Where Reed just like, I was like, no, like of course, I didn't play football. I stayed behind like a good little nerd, but years later, I'm one of the smartest people on the planet. I'm engaged to the hottest woman on the planet, and that quarterback, well, he's here now asking me for my help, and I say he's not going to get a damn thing until he does what I say. And he started showing me and my team some respect. And of course, General's like, okay, give him what he needs. And of course, this turns on Sue, as it's like all of them is so impressed by Reed at that moment. And it was like a good moment for Reed. It's like nah, like you've been talking so much crap to us, and downplaying me and my accolades. Is like no. So this is how we gonna do it, because you're needing my help and my expertise on this stuff, and you cannot get it, can you, until I corroborate. So until you start acting like you got some sense, I'm not helping you. Point blank, period. I can go home, or I can do this myself my way, and you guys can just fall back. So they end up start setting up their little tech things. Of course, it was Sue who runs into the Surfer again, and of course her powers trying to pull up a shield. That means nothing to him. He just passes right through it. And she asks him point blank, like, why are you destroying our planet? And he says, like, I'm not the one who's doing this. But then he gets distracted when the military finds the Surfer, gets them in that line of sight, tries to shoot off rockets, but of course he deflects all of them. Then Reed tells the team to turn on the machines, and it disrupts his connection to the board. So they're in Siberia in this little U.S. government-controlled area, black site location, where they're running experiments on Norrin Radd. And of course, they're not able to enter and question the Surfer for no particular reason, because General is just like a freaking hater. And of course, he's made a deal with Doom to allow him to run his little private test in exchange for his assistance, under supervision, of course. But before all that, they trick one of the guards into opening the door so that way Sue can sneak out and confront the Surfer, who explains to her that the being coming to their planet is named Galactus, the World Devourer. I only service him because I made a deal. In exchange for him not destroying my planet, I will be his herald and find other planets for him to feast on, because it's one of those sympathetic villains in comic book history. It's like Galactus is not really evil. He needs, given his size and his powers, in order to sustain himself, like anybody who needs food, he needs to consume planets. And it was only things in existence with enough energy resources to sustain him for a period of time. Now, of course, certain heralds of Galactus try their best to find uninhabited planets for him to consume in order to get the job done, and avoiding planets with life on it, or at the very least no sentient life on it. No humanoids or whatever, So he explains to Susan that, look, like, my board is my beacon. He's following it. Just give me to my board. I can lead him away. So the team breaks out, but unfortunately they didn't make it in time, where Doom ends up killing the general and the soldiers, except for Frankie. Steals the board because he has his little suit and everything like that. I think I like the suit in the first film a lot better than what we have here, because it looks like almost all metal, because it's got to be like a combination of like kind of metallic and green kind of clothes. So he steals the board, which it happens in the comics where Dr. Doom had stolen Silver Surfer's board and used his power from it in order to wreak havoc or try to rule. So he gets like a piece of power cosmic from it. So the team rescues the Surfer. Reed summons the Fantastic Car. We actually get the Fantastic Car finally. And they try to convince Doom to give up the board because it's a beacon to summon the Devourer. But, of course, Doom is not going to listen. They end up in China as they try to battle Doom. But unfortunately, his power is on a different kind of scale, where it's like, Ben can touch him, but nobody else can get that close to him. But he'll see him come from a mile away. But even though Johnny will be faster, but he doesn't have the physicality in order to lay good hits on him. The Doom then takes because this confused a lot of people from what I remember back in the day, where Susan tries to protect the Surfer from being impaled by Doom. So he ends up taking a piece of the board and forming some kind of metallic spear and or were made of power cosmic, flings it, and it, despite Sue's shield, it passes right through it because made of the same substance as the Silver Surfer, who displayed earlier he can just pass on through her shields. So she ends up getting impaled. Now, back in the day, I think a lot of people like me probably just thought like got impaled by like a regular pipe or something, but no, it was like it's actually a piece of the board, so it kind of makes sense. What is made of the same essence as the Silver Surfer means nothing to the Fantastic Four's abilities. So Johnny comes up with an idea where they all give him his powers. So in a way, we still get the Super Skrull, which was one of my favorite Marvel characters, Marvel villain characters. And you have to see like a display of, something that we could have gotten with the Super Skrull, but because how Secret Invasion kind of screwed up that stuff because they named that little device the Super Skrull or something like that, or the project called the Super Skrull. It's just like, y'all so lame, and you're ruining a good villain you could have had in the MCU. Since you're bringing in the Fantastic Four, eventually you need to bring in the Clerk, the Super Skrull. But we actually get to see a display of how the Super Skrull powers would have operated in live action, where he's in and out invisibility, stretching all over the place, rock like fists and constantly inflamed, and just like something like we got from like Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Just an awesome display of the Fantastic Four's abilities operating in unison. And you get to hear like Johnny Storm's like, the quarter friend of mine is clobbering time, and just beats the heck out of Doctor Doom, and causes the device on Doom's wrist to circuit, separating him from the board, and with Ben operating a crane, knocking Doom into the nearby river, him just sinking in because he's wearing like an armored suit, but it's causing him to sink into the ocean. Lord knows he really is dead or not. He ends up giving back everybody's powers, but when the Silver Surfer finally claims his board, he heals Sue. He begins to fly in the sky as Galactus is arriving to consume the planet. Now, I'll make a mention here because it still is a problem. It is like a major problem. The biggest glaring problem is just the way they want to depict Galactus, which inside is some kind of flaming silhouette of what we expect Galactus to look like. But he's just like a giant storm cloud, which is very lame. And it's probably because, like I stated before, at that time when this came out, comic book movies wasn't taken so seriously. They're, for the most part, were box office duds. So they didn't want to fit the bill and actually get like the comic accurate looking Galactus. With Fantastic Four First Steps coming out, we actually see a glimpse of what the Galactus would look like, which is more comic accurate. But at that time back then, I don't think people were expecting that, but I guess Hollywood studios at the time didn't want to fit the bill to give a comic accurate looking Galactus at that time, which is like a crying shame and the biggest F up at that time. And I don't think it was Tim Story's fault. There is probably some compromises he had to make, and Galactus was one of those things he just had to like, okay, I can't do this, and I don't have the budget, and we just gonna have to be creative with it. And unfortunately, what he came up with didn't work for the wide variety of audiences, and it still doesn't work. So, thanks to Johnny Storm giving Surfer the boost he needs to get out into the space, he goes inside the storm cloud and pretty much self-destruct, destroying Galactus. Don't know why he never did that at any time before, which is also another glaring issue. But the day is saved, and thanks to his second contact with the Surfer, Johnny's powers are stable again. Reed and Sue goes to Japan with a weird amount of audience. Could have just been small with immediate friends. But Reed and Sue finally get hitched. And they go to save something that was about to be sinking. And yeah, and that was in the Silver Surfer. Not good, but looking back on it, there was moments. There has its moments. But I'm not going to say that it's the greatest thing ever. Or people were wrong about it all these years. The criticisms are still valid. What I managed to compile is moments where, we probably overlooked because of the bad moments, but there are some good qualities out of this that you can still mine from. It's not terrible by any stretch of the imagination, because there's a whole lot worse films that we and TV shows, superhero related, that we got long after it, that by comparison, it's still slightly better than it. And then Tim's story, I think, he did his best, because I think the fact that he added in these little things that I think was overlooked, that he cares for these characters and he did his research. But unfortunately, there's certain things that, like many of the X-Men films, like some like Ghost Rider films, and the later Blade films, there's certain things that didn't work. But it doesn't mean that they didn't offer some kind of substance for the, Deadpool and Wolverine kind of highlight that they contribute. These movies contributed in some fashion to what we got now in terms of superhero films as we know of it. And you got to give both Tim Story, Fantastic Four films credit, because they did offer something to the wide world of superhero films. But I had a lot of fun. It was like a fun ride. Still issues. I think I still prefer the first film, Fantastic Four film, over this. But it has its moments. I think like my best parts are the actors themselves, especially like the main four. But anyway, that was Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. I'm curious to know what you guys think of the film. Like, do you still have problems with it? Are you over your issues with it? Do you see some other nuances about it that you didn't see before that you're seeing it now? Let me know. And now, by next week, moving forward, I'll be beginning my holiday movie reviews. We're starting with Halloween stuff, because everybody's starting Halloween earlier and earlier each year. So I might as well also get to jump on it, because I got a lot of stuff that I want to review for Halloween review month. So I'm going to start next week with the Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. So yeah, that'll be fun. So look forward to that. And I will see you guys maybe a little later with something, some game I want to stream. I don't know which one. I haven't picked it out just yet. Probably something low-key. Maybe Destiny. Just something like quick and low-key. But anyway, I will see you guys soon. Take care and have a pleasant weekend. Peace.